Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Time with Him. This is Pastor Randy with Eagles Wings Fellowship, wishing you a great day. Today, I want to go into the book of John again and start in chapter 13. This would be Thursday in the Holy Week, and a lot of things happened during this day. But I want to start out in verse 1, and there's no possible way I can cover everything in 10 minutes. So I suggest that you read 13 through 21 to get a feel and the knowledge of everything that transpired Thursday, Friday through Resurrection Sunday. So I'll begin reading here, and I'm just going to read a few verses. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper, laid aside his outer garment, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. And he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. And I'm going to stop there, because further than that, it gets into some dialogue. I want you to notice that this is just before the feast of the Passover. And Jesus knew, as we talked about the other day, Jesus knew his hour had come, his time had come, that his mission was almost fulfilled for his earthly ministry. And he was going forward with that mission, that he was going to leave this world as we know it and go back to the Father from whence it came. And he makes a statement here that those that he loved in this world, he loved to the end. And by that, I mean his disciples, all of those that followed him and were faithful to him. He loved them to the end. You see, Jesus' love knows no limits. The only limitation there is what we as individuals put on it. And that's if we stop doing his will or deny him outright. Well, if we deny him, we can't hardly say that we love him. Because if we love him, then we're going to keep his commands. But it's interesting that verse 2 says, during supper, and this would be the Last Supper, when the devil had already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, that during this time, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God. You see, Jesus had all these things rolling around in his heart, in his mind, in his spirit. He has a few things yet that he must do. One of those things is to show the heart of a servant. So what does he do? He fills a basin full of water. He takes off, his outer tunic, and he puts a towel around his waist. And he goes around the room. And remember, contrary to Leonardo da Vinci's painting where they're all sitting around a table, the custom at that time was that they would lounge around a table. They would lean on their hand and on their elbow. And then they could pick the food from the table and they could eat that way. They weren't seated like I'm seated now as I address you. They weren't eating from a plate with a fork, knife, and spoon like we do. That wasn't the custom of the day. So they were lounging. So Jesus made his way around and he washed their feet. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords made a statement in doing that he came to be a servant, even though he knew he was king and he was Lord. This was a very special moment for the disciples to see their master wash their feet. You see, the tradition at the time was if a visitor entered your house, a servant was there to wash the feet of the guests. They didn't have to take a bath. It was just washing the dirt and the dust, and you can imagine everything on the roads during that time that they would walk through or try to walk around, and that had to be washed off their feet so they could enter the house clean and then do whatever they were going to do. Well, there was a lot to be done during this evening and during the rest of this day. They had to do the Last Supper. Jesus implemented the Last Supper. Jesus prayed the high priestly prayer over them. They went to Gethsemane. Jesus prayed 3 times. He took Peter, James, and John with him further than he left the other disciples. And then he went off alone. And he prayed. And he was under such duress that the word tells us that he sweat drops of blood. Well, this is an actual condition. All you have to do is look it up. This literally happens when an individual is under so much stress that the capillaries surrounding the sweat glands break, and that blood gets into the sweat, and blood actually comes out of your sweat pores. So he did indeed sweat drops of blood that fell to the ground. Can you imagine yourself about to undergo everything that he was about to undergo and not sweat blood, knowing that you were going to be horrifically tortured and then crucified, forced to carry your own cross up to the hill of crucifixion, Golgotha? Don't you think you'd be under a lot of duress as well? Well, he was. And it was coming out. But the wonderful thing about that prayer was this line: nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Jesus totally surrendered any hesitation that he may have had. Any. And he put himself 100% into the Father's hands, knowing this mission for mankind had to be fulfilled. So read the rest of this book and read all the other Gospels from this account forward through the end to the ascension. You will learn a lot. You'll understand more. But don't read it just to read it. Read it to devour it, as if it were the most vital piece of food you would ever eat in your life. And you'll discover some things about him, the disciples, and believe it or not, yourself, if you read this objectively with an open mind and an open open spirit. Now, we won't have a time with him tomorrow. I have to be out of town. So this will be it for the week. God bless you. Remember, Easter Sunday's coming. We'd love to have you here at Eagles Wings Fellowship. The information's on the crawler on the bottom of the screen. But go somewhere. Go somewhere. Because the resurrection story is the only reason that Christianity is different than any other world religion. Our Savior rose from the dead. None other, no other religion can make that profession with eyewitness testimony of more than just one or two or 12. Over 500 saw him ascend back into heaven. So I've gone a bit over my time, but remember, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe on him would not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into this world to condemn it, but through him the world might be saved. If you're not saved, take advantage of that. Give yourself over to him. Completely surrender to him the same way Jesus said, not my will, but thine be done. And until next time, this is Pastor Randy with Eagles Wings, wishing you a great weekend. Have a wonderful Easter. Have fun. But remember, it's not about bunnies and eggs. It's about the resurrection of our Savior. And we'll see you next time.